And so we had £10,000. Our naivety told us that the best course of action would be to start, to spend the money until it ran out, and to raise it as we went along. Unquestionably, did we find ourselves in the situation where more money was promised out than existed tangibly. And you don't personally have that in your bank account, neither does either of the other two people making the film, and none of your families will bail you out. Eventually, painstakingly, we find investors, slowly, painfully, one by one. Also, I was working as a corporate video editor, and every penny that I was making was also going to settle the most dramatic of the debts. The film actually went to the Moscow Film Festival in 2020 or 2019 and won it for Best Director and Best Lead. It was getting an incredible response, and then the pandemic came along. This unshakable momentum that we'd had for 3 years just came finally crashing down. Hi, my name is Tom. I perform under the name Tomfoolery, make films under the name Tomfoolery, and I'm a Welsh filmmaker living in London.
And Tom, can you tell us a little bit how you started in your career?
Everything I've ever done in my life has kind of been a clumsy stumbling in the direction of my interest. So I've never been very good at telling people what I wanted to do with my life or for a job. I've never really known, and it's changed many, many times. I've had lots of jobs in my life. I've worked in bars, call centers. I temporarily was an orange picker. I worked in a carnival fairground on one of the rigged stalls for a while. And when I went to study, I was fascinated by, well, first I wanted to be an actor because I was obsessed with movies growing up, as so many people of our generation were. And I thought misguidedly that actors were the storytellers. And then when I went off to study, I became much more interested in writing and directing. And I left university, and with my two best friends, we started a film production company straight out of the gate. But the problem was none of us knew how to produce film. We were three wannabe writer-directors who had started a production company with no knowledge of film production. And we weren't very clued up to what it would entail, but we'd produced plays before. We'd produced theatre before, live events and live shows, and we produced some small short films and some music videos and things like this. But we didn't really know what we were taking on or what we were about to embark on by starting this film production company. And each of the three of us had scripts that we really wanted to make. And we wanted to be the writer and director of these feature films. They were all features. And such was our naivety. I think I was 23 years old. So I shouldn't have been this naive at that age. But we played a poker game to decide who went first. So the plan was whoever won the game would have their film made first, and the other two would produce, because we were of the belief that, we were too insignificant to convince anyone real or proper to produce our films. So we'd learn. And my friend Rishi won the game, and we began the 3-year process of making his film, which was called Hilda. It was the story of this 17-year-old girl growing up in East London who's obsessed with dancing. And she's got a 10-year-old sister and a newborn baby brother. And it was actually loosely based on a true story from writer-director New. And, around the midpoint of the film, her parents, who are incredibly unstable, deeply flawed characters with severe mental health problems, they leave, they vanish. Well, they don't vanish, but they're no longer in the picture. And the 17-year-old girl is forced to drop out of school and find work to try and keep siblings with her to avoid them being taken into care. So she's this incredible dancer. And at first she finds work in, really, she gets quite lucky and she finds some great dancing work. And then as that starts to disappear, the avenues that she's led down are, more and more seedy and full of despair. And yeah, it's quite an indie film, gritty, British, beautiful. And we had this script and we didn't know what to do with it. And an old university lecturer who was unlike any teacher you would ever have. He is very reminiscent of Robin Williams in Dead Poets Society, if you've seen that film. He said that he would invest in our film. It was kind of an investment, kind of a generous loan, really, that was to be repaid either on the film's completion or by us working in our later lives. And so we had £10,000, which was, this was an enormous scale concept for a film. There were so many locations, so many characters, so many people involved, and our naivety told us that the best course of action would be to start and to spend the money until it ran out and to raise it as we went along. And that began what was one of the most stressful and unpleasant 3-year experiences of my life. It was really there were many times throughout the course of making this film where we would be using people's services and equipment without the money in the bank to pay for them. And it was classic independent filmmaking. Young guys, really, really enthusiastic, really passionate, really believed in the story that they were trying to tell, and would just keep ourselves going with this strong belief that as long as we didn't stop, as long as we kept going, as long as we kept knocking on doors, because we're hardworking, we're relatively organizational, and so the actual production elements of organizing the people and places and things, negotiating deals, making sure we got in-kind services handed to us, we're excellent at that. But as you know from filmmaking, there are some things you just can't blag. There are some things that absolutely have to be paid for. People have to be transported. They have to be fed. Equipment has to be present. The location needs to be the location needs to be there. And this film, one of the things I always admired about my friend Rishi, who was the director of this project, was he was really, really, really good at motivational speeches, which it turns out are very, very valuable when you're trying to get the ship over the mountain. And we just went forward, and we kept, I don't know what was driving us, maybe a desire to prove ourselves as filmmakers, because we had this great obsession, and it went on and it went on, and the money was spent very, very quickly. But with the footage that was shot as a result of that money being spent, we were able to edit together sizzles and teasers that we would show to other people. Myself and the co-producer, his name's Nassim, we had a problem because we looked for all the traditional sources of raising money, the public grants and these bodies where you can apply for funding, the BFI, Film London.
How many days did the $10,000 last? Like, how many days of shooting did you end up getting to kind of have the sizzle reel?
To give you some context, I have never talked publicly about the making of this film, and you're going to think many of the things that I say are ridiculous. And actually, what's crazy is throughout the process, we were very frequently advised, whenever I would reach out to people, because I was reaching out to people all the time, we were advised that what we were doing was the complete wrong way to do this. No one told us this was a good idea, but we filmed every day from October to New Year's Eve in 2017 for 3 months. We shot every single day with a crew of 15 and a cast of, there was a lead. There was about 10 to 15 supporting characters, and then there were tons of extras. And in the United States, I think you have, it depends what you're talking about. It depends if you're talking about a big production or not. I don't think we did a lot of these things the way that you're supposed to do these things. So,
it's in a film with $10,000, so you can't. But
the total budget of the film was just over 200,000.
You started with, correct?
But we began shooting day one with, I mean, this is why your question's difficult of how many days shooting did we get to the 10. We never stopped. And the 10 was spent before the first day of shooting, in a way. Oh. But in a way, even though maybe it hadn't all left the bank account because it had been promised out. It had been promised out to the camera hire company. It had been promised out to the van hire company. It had been promised out to the cinema, I don't mean all of it, but like portions of it had been promised out to various necessary cogs in this intricate wheel. And, one of the things that kept it going was people believed that they would be paid once it was, once their contribution was complete. So unquestionably, did we find ourselves in the situation where more money was promised out than existed tangibly, and the real stress of knowing that maybe you've got 5,000 in the bank, but maybe you've got 40,000 worth of money spent that hasn't been requested just yet, but will be. And you don't personally have that in your bank account. Neither does either of the other two people making the film, and none of your families will bail you out. None of our families are in the position where they're going to solve debt that we have created while making an independent feature film. And yet, it felt a bit like this. It felt a bit like if you're swimming from one point to another point, once you've swum a certain distance, even if you feel like you're drowning, it's further to swim back to where you started than to swim to the other end. Like that was honestly the feeling that drove us throughout that time. It was the feeling that we can't undo what's begun, so we just have to keep going forward. We just have to keep finding more money. We have to find rich people. I don't know rich people. Like all the public grants are very slow, and they all say no. So they're not helpful when you're shooting now. Like when I read some of the emails they sent in 2017, I cringe so hard because of the feeling of desperation. I was emailing myself and the co-producer. We were emailing everyone. We managed to get David Heyman on the phone, the producer of the Harry Potter films. We managed to convince the actor Tim Roth from Quentin Tarantino's film Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. We managed to convince him to be an executive producer, but he didn't give us any money. But we basically managed to get in touch with him and convinced him to allow us to use his name to get other people to put money into the project, using his name as kind of a reputational flagpoint, because he read the script. He had a 3-hour-long meeting with the director and believed in the project and believed in crazy British kids. We're gonna get it done. We didn't really feel the pain of the debt that we were in until post-production. It was possible for a long time we kept encountering, the whole film was funded throughout production, largely on people that we could meet, genuinely largely through cold outreach, who we could gain the, I don't know, have you seen the documentary Burden of Dreams with Werner Herzog, where he's trying to make Fitzcarraldo? Yeah. You must. It's excellent. It's really excellent. And that I don't want to digress and talk about that production, but that film, Fitzcarraldo, was burning money. And they had it. They had studio backing, but this one person's just undiminishable passion for the project kept the ship going over the mountain. And that's how we would be every time we spoke to someone. And the most frequent thing I remember being told around that period of time was that I'm not investing in the film because the film is a terrible investment. You can't show me anything. I don't know if it's going to be, but I'm investing in you as people because I think you're going to do something interesting in your life. And this is an amount of money I can deal with losing if I'm wrong. And that got us through production. Barely. And when I say got us through production, I mean paid for the things that you physically cannot move without paying.
So how much did you raise before production?
Before production?
Yeah.
10,000.
So you had 10,000 as you're going through production.
3 months were spent on production. We also made the terrible decision that we should film the film chronologically. This is a terrible way to make a film. But you don't know these things. We didn't go to film school. And we just wanted to make a great film. That's all we wanted to do. And it was great. It is a great film. I must say I've made other things in my life that I know are crap. So I'm not one of those people that think everything that they're involved in is excellent. That's not true at all. I've made many not very good things, but we knew that this was good. We knew that this was high quality, and this was going to be valuable.
You have 12-hour days, so I'm guessing you're producing, and then after kind of producing, you're sending out emails trying to find money because you guys know you're pretty much out of money.
Yeah, we were on the ground producing during the shooting hours, which, as you've quite rightly said, were 10 to 12-hour days. We would be there making sure that it was happening. Often, I remember there was this one scene we had to get. At one point, Hilda, the main character and the title of the film is called Hilda, is the backing dancer at this big DJ concert, and we effectively needed 1,000 extras. We hired Manchester Metropolitan University Student Union. We hired a student union with money we didn't have and extras we didn't have, but we had covered everything that was going to be happening on the stage. The actors that were going to be on the stage. We had the crew. But the only thing we didn't have was the extras, and they couldn't be dancing to an empty room because the scene in the film only makes sense if it's a sold out like venue. This is the high point of her dancing before it starts to take a dive. And we misguidedly thought, because we went to Manchester University and we were so involved while we were at the university, we were so involved with the various societies and the filmmaking society and the drama society, and we were always doing things, and we'd been out of university for a year now, and we thought that we'd be able to fill that room no problem because we knew that many people that still attended the university, and we were just completely wrong. Like it was like that moment in Lord of the Rings where you blow the horn and you want the riders of Rohan to show up at the top of the hill and no one shows up, and you're still fighting down there. And so myself and the assistant director, even though we weren't students anymore, we were panicking because we were supposed to start shooting in 4 hours, and we ran into the university halls and just started knocking on every single door. And these are huge building, like a big block of flats. You take the elevator all the way up to the 30th floor and you work your way down, and we would knock on every door. Students would open their door and we'd say, "We're shooting a film in Manchester Metropolitan Student Union in 3 hours. Get your whole house down there, and we'll buy you a drink. And you're going to be in a film that Tim Roth is executive producing." That's what we said. And over the course of, and we were like, sometimes we'd knock on the door and just go into the flat and start explaining our story to these poor confused students. And somehow we didn't get 1,000, but maybe we got about 400 out of nothing to show up into this room. And then with, filming on a gimbal, going through, as long as you pack the bodies together and they're all dancing and the lighting is such, and then you weave through the bodies that you do have, you're able to edit that so that the room looks relatively packed, and you've just got to be careful with wides. Yeah, it was a really strange it's a really strange process.
Now, after you finish that film, I talked to a lot of filmmakers that, say they kind of get screwed over in distribution. How did distribution work for you? Because I know you're a new filmmaker at this time. So how does that aspect come after you got all the money, after you got post-production, everything is kind of winded down. Now you're trying to go. How does that go?
I'll answer your question. I won't bore you with post. Post was really hard. Post was actually when people who we'd convinced to lend their time and services and equipment, people that we'd convinced came looking for the money that we'd promised them, and it didn't exist. And that's when that took a year, maybe a year and a half post-production. It didn't need to in terms of the amount of time editing the film, but post was a really lonely time because it went from this big buzzing. You were able to constantly get adrenaline from the fact that you were shooting every day, and suddenly you're in post and there's 3 of you, and we were basically living in the shipping container that we were editing the film in North London. There's a place called Bethnal Green, and there's a compound called Containerville, and Containerville are all these shipping containers that have been repurposed, stacked on top of each other. And we found one that's a repurposed editing facility. And we would edit the film and send emails and live in this, the three of us in this container for many, many months. Anyway, you asked about distribution. I won't bore you with all of that. Eventually, painstakingly, we find investors slowly, painfully, one by one. Also, I was working as a corporate video editor. I was editing videos for Ferrero Rocher, for Airbus, for Fenty, Rihanna's clothing brand, because I'm video editor. That's a skill that I taught myself very, very early when I was 18. And so I was able to get this corporate editing work, and every penny that I was making was also going to settle the most dramatic of the debts, whoever was chasing us the most loudly. And eventually, finally, we got to the stage where no one was chasing us, and the film was finished. And I've really glossed over about a year and a half of one of the most stressful. I'll never repeat that method of doing things. I'll never start making a film again before raising the money for the film. And I've made films since. I just released The Spaceman, which on my YouTube channel, which is a film I made starring Colin Farrell and Woody Norman, but I can tell you about that afterwards. You asked about distribution. The film is very gritty. It's very niche. Hilda, the one we were making for the 3 years, and we knew we needed film festivals. So we applied it to film festivals all over the world, and we got in to a huge string of film festivals. We got into Edinburgh, we got into Tallinn, we got into Raindance in London, we got into Moscow. The film actually went to the Moscow Film Festival in 2020 or 2019 and won it for Best Director and Best Lead. It was getting an incredible response. And then the pandemic came along in March of 2020, and just this unshakable momentum that we'd had for 3 years just came finally crashing down. Like, it was hard enough anyway, and then the global pandemic, the cancellation of the majority of the film festivals that we intended to go to was it was the final straw, really. Like, it just stopped everything. And the film was getting such a great reaction at the film festivals it went to. It was winning awards. It was really gaining traction. And suddenly we had the problem that all three of us were broke, and we hadn't managed to sell the film, and we had nothing really to, we needed to support ourselves, because suddenly there was a major lockdown. Ironically, 4 weeks later, I'm also a poet. I've been performing spoken word poetry since I was 15. Now I turned 30 3 days ago. So I've been doing spoken word poetry for 15 years, always just as a hobby. It was just my favorite hobby. And at the start of the pandemic, I moved back home at the age of 26 with my dad, stepmom, and my 6-year-old brother and sister. And I'd just been on this 3-year journey of making this movie called Hilda. And I was really feeling low about the fact that I didn't know what was going to happen to that film next. And I was writing poems about the pandemic and turning them into little videos with my little brother and sister. And I started a YouTube channel. And there was no one following this YouTube channel. It was just a place to put the videos that I was making with my little brother and sister during the pandemic. And the 4th video that we posted was called The Great Realization, and was watched over 100 million times on social media. It was shared by the Kardashians. It was shared by Jake Gyllenhaal. It was shared by the cast of Friends. I had to do global press. I was on the Today Show with Hoda and Jenna, is it, in the US. I was on the Today Show in India. I was on the morning show in the UK, in Australia, in New Zealand, in the Philippines. And it was a really strange situation to be faced with, because I'd spent 3 years and £200,000 making a feature film that I couldn't sell, and a 3-minute video with a budget of 0 that I made with my 6-year-old brother and sister as crew in their bedroom, suddenly, had created global attention, and I didn't know what to do with that. And suddenly I had this channel. I used the momentum of that video to begin my next project, to raise the money and to do the casting for my next project, which was called The Spaceman. As I said, starring Colin Farrell, Woody Norman, Amanda Abington, and I gave myself and my little brother and sister a little cameo role in it. And I spent 2 years making that film with the hope that if I could get that film made and released well, I could resurrect Hilda. And Hilda is yet to be resurrected. So
You ever get distribution on it?
No, it exists now only on a private Vimeo link, which is maybe I would say one of the saddest things I've yet to accomplish. Does that make sense? I'm very sad that I've not yet solved the problem of distribution for that film, because we solved so many problems for that film. And don't get me wrong, it's been offered a ton of places. The problem is the audience for it would be film lovers. It's not suitable for children. It's quite a dark film. The language is very violent in parts. It's quite an auteur, niche, gritty British independent film, and it's not got mass. It's hard for an unknown director to get a film like this sold, is what we found. You'd need to be someone like Gaspar Noé or Mike Lynch, after that movie was finished, the director doesn't seem to kind of go on with his career, but you seem to keep going. Like, what kind of happened to you that made you keep making projects even after all that struggle? The reason I've never stopped is because I've never considered there to be a start or a stop. You've just got to do things. I can't not do things. So I don't mind where I work, really. I'll always find a way to make it interesting. I know I love storytelling. Now, I don't mind what format that takes. I really don't mind if it's a short film or a feature film or a 3-minute poem or a TV series. I don't mind. I love telling stories. That's my favorite thing to do. And they take different forms. The Spaceman, which I spent 2 years making, is a 40-minute film, and it exists on my YouTube channel. For anyone interested, that is probably Tomfoolery. Those 2 words, probably Tomfoolery. But if you just search The Spaceman on YouTube, you'll find it. And it's straight. Many people think feature film is the promised land, and you make shorts to make a feature film, right? Well, the first film I ever made or produced was a 1 hour 45-minute feature film, which took me 3 years to create, and then I made a 40-minute short film, and now I've been making lots and lots of 3-minute poetry videos, and I don't see it as a step forward or a step back. I just like making stuff. I like making things with talented people. I would love to, prove that I've got competence at this, so that, I could raise the bar so that I can have greater access to raising money. I don't really enjoy producing. I directed and produced The Spaceman mainly because I think as long as you've got one foot in the producing camp, you retain a certain element of control, which you lose as soon as someone else is in control of the purse strings. But mainly,
The Spaceman, how does that come about? Like, do you end up raising the money yourself, and how do you get Colin Farrell? Obviously, it's a very small cast, so I feel like you learned let's keep it small and keep it probably in limited locations.
Well, you can see, no one else can. I can see so many of my learnings from Hilda in The Spaceman. The whole film pretty much takes place in one location. Hilda had, upwards of 30 locations. The Spaceman has no extras. That was not an accident. It was the most contained film possible. I didn't write it. Normally the films I direct or the stories that I tell, I like to write, but The Spaceman was an exception. The Great Realization poetry video had just gone viral, and my friend, a good filmmaking friend of mine, asked me if I'd read his short film. And as a filmmaker, you'll know that this happens all the time. Your friends will ask you to read something, and more often than not, you read it and you hopefully, enjoy reading it, and then you give them some advice, because he wanted advice. He wanted advice of from me. He knew I'd made this feature. He wanted advice of how to get the ball rolling with this short film. And I remember I was so busy when he sent it to me that I didn't read it for a month, and he sent me a nudge. And I remember thinking, don't want to let my friend down. And I was in the office. We temporarily in 2021, because the video went viral, and suddenly there was this business out of nowhere. I had office space. I was in an office, and it was about 8 p.m. and it was just me there. And I read the film, and I just thought, that was it. I don't know if it just resonated with me because it reminded me of things that I'd experienced in my life, or there were characters that I recognized from my own life, maybe, as a nicer way of putting it. But it's one of the only times I've read something that a friend sent to me, and as soon as I got to the end, I just started again. I just read it again. And then I called him and I said, I'll make this. I would love to make this. I'll produce this. I'll direct this. You're the writer. He wanted to direct it and I wanted to direct it. We ended up sharing the directing responsibilities, and I produced it, and it was it was a wonderful experience making that film. You asked how I, in terms of the production elements, I'd never had personal money before, but the video that went viral was suddenly being approached by book publishers, to turn it into an illustrated picture book for kids. Not just for kids, but an illustrated picture book. And I just signed a, pretty lucrative book deal. It was being published in over 20 countries around the world, including the US, by HarperCollins. And I just signed this great book deal. And it was the first time in my life I had money of my own. And I'd already started speaking to my agent about this film. And I'd asked, Woody Norman was provisionally attached. He's this little boy who, well, he's not a little boy anymore. He's turning into a young man. But back then, I think he was 11 years old, and he'd just done an A24 film with Joaquin Phoenix where he was the lead, called Come On, Come On. So this little 10-year-old boy has got a more impressive film career than I do. And he was signed up to play the lead. And I really wanted to try and get Colin Farrell to play the spaceman. And I through research found that Colin Farrell was represented by the same agency that had just signed me as a poet. And so I asked my agent if they could put me on the phone with Colin Farrell, and they could. And a call was set up, and I basically did what I've done my whole life. I did a very impassioned pitch and asked him for very little money to play the spaceman, and he agreed. And I hadn't spent any money on the film yet, but now I've got the opportunity to make, these were the only two actors attached at this stage. I've got the opportunity now in front of me to make a film with Woody Norman and Colin Farrell. And I've just signed this book deal. And I was basically in the position where I could either put down a deposit on my first flat, on my first apartment, and get onto the property ladder, or I could make a film. And I've never made good decisions, it seems, because the property ladder is a much, much better investment. But I thought that, in my life, I believe that I will be able to make money. I'll be able to earn a living if that is my goal. If my goal becomes monetary, I'll be able to get myself into that situation again. But this opportunity, I think when this opportunity is gone, it might be gone. So I chose to make a film, which is why I'm still renting and not owning. But I loved it. It was great. And as far as I'm concerned, every single thing you make as a storyteller or a filmmaker or a poet or a showrunner, whatever it is, every single thing you make, particularly independently, allows you to learn more lessons than I think you'll ever learn theoretically from speaking to people or from film school even. I think you'll really learn some quite potent lessons from just making things and getting it painfully wrong and trying not to go wrong, but you'll go wrong. It'll give you the opportunity to improve on past errors, and it'll give you the opportunity to try and do what I think we're all addicted to, which is to tell a story that is truly compelling. And, that's a noble goal. And I think I'm still heading in the direction of my interest. And I hope that I could speak to you 20 years from now and I still would be, I don't know what will happen in terms of my career, but I know that when you change your perspective and your goals, then actually you can always make things. If your goal is to make $100 million Marvel movies, then that's a terrible goal, because for a huge portion of your life and your time, you won't be able to make that. But if you always honestly assess, and ask yourself, with the resources that are available to me right now, what can I make right now? Then, even if that's, the poetry videos that I was making with my little brother and sister during the pandemic, I found them thoroughly enjoyable to make. I wasn't sad that I couldn't keep making feature films. I was sad that this one didn't have distribution, but I was just continuing to make things. And then one of those videos that, could have so easily been insignificant because they had no budget, led directly to the opportunity to make a film with a man who's, in my opinion, one of the finest actors working today. And so I think as long as you're always making things, then, you're still playing.